If you've ever heard me talk about why I hate Intuit, the company, I'm reading you today on the podcast the third of three parts of an article called Inside TurboTax's 20-Year Fight to Stop Americans from Filing Their Taxes for Free. This is part three of three. If you missed the first two episodes, I recommend you go back in your podcast feed and listen to them in order. It is an incredible piece of investigative research that I am sharing with the permission of the authors, Justin Elliott and Paul Keel. Enjoy. Amid its success, Intuit has sometimes had to put down insurgents bent on reforming the tax filing system. In 2007, the same year Intuit launched its free edition, Barack Obama, then a candidate for president, took aim at the tax prep industry. In a speech to an audience of tax wonks in Washington, he promised that the IRS would establish a simple return system. Quote, "This means no more worry, no more waste of time, no more extra expense for a tax preparer," unquote, he declared. But the Obama administration, as Bush's had before, found that it was no match for Intuit. Again, Bernie Mackay, the lobbyist who had joined Intuit in the late 1990s and outlasted multiple CEOs, led the company's campaign. In response to the Obama threat, Mackay and Intuit's small army of outside lobbyists turned to Congress, where lawmakers friendly to the company introduced a series of bills that would elevate Free File from a temporary deal with the IRS to the law of the land. Republicans have historically been the company's most reliable supporters, but some Democrats joined them. Rep. Zoe Lofgren, the California Democrat whose district includes part of Silicon Valley, has introduced or co-sponsored 5 bills over the years that would codify the Free File program, with names like the Free File Permanence Act. Lofgren's spokesperson told ProPublica that the Congresswoman believes the IRS, because of its role as tax collector, should not also be the tax preparer. Hedging its bets, the company also sought to make sure the IRS could not spend a single dollar creating a public filing system. One internal document says Intuit would, quote, "advance legislative language in House appropriations for no funds restriction on IRS spending," unquote, on such a system. It worked. Within a few years, Congress passed a 3,000-page appropriations bill that included a single sentence crucial to Intuit's financial future. Quote, "No funds," unquote, the law decreed, could be used, quote, "to provide any person a proposed final return or statement." Another important aspect of Intuit's influence strategy during the Obama years was covertly enlisting minority and women's groups to press its case. The internal 2014-2015 encroachment strategy document discloses plans to, quote, "leverage trade groups to support House Senate free file bills," unquote. It goes on to list the groups: Women's Impacting Public Policy, the Latino Coalition, and the National Black Chamber of Commerce. Intuit has given money to all of those groups over the years. All have signed letters urging Congress to make the free file deal permanent. Quote, "The free file program has been a clear success," unquote, said one letter signed by the Latino Coalition and the Hispanic Leadership Fund. A spokesperson for Women Impacting Public Policy said it has received $70,000 from Intuit. The amounts given to the other groups are unknown, and they did not respond for requests for comment. Company documents also outline plans to, quote, "mobilize a coalition," quotes, that included think tanks and academics who published op-eds. Will Marshall, president of the Pro-Business Progressive Policy Institute, opposed return-free filing in an op-ed in The Hill because doing one's taxes is, quote, "a teachable moment that prompts us to review our financial circumstances," unquote. Anti-tax activist Grover Norquist, the most consistent champion of Intuit's policy positions, warned that, quote, "big spenders in Washington, D.C. want to socialize all tax preparation in America," unquote. It is unclear whether they were paid by Intuit or the Free File Alliance. Norquist didn't respond to a request for comment, and a Progressive Policy Institute spokesman declined to say whether Intuit gave the group money. Whatever external challenges to the status quo Intuit has faced, the company has been able to rely on the IRS's continuing enthusiastic support of the Free File program. Every few years, the IRS and the industry got together to renew the deal. In part, that was due to the relationships Intuit had developed with high-ranking IRS officials. One, Dave Williams, served as the agency's top negotiator on the Free File program for several years and, quote, was very commercially sensitive, said Mark Ernst, the CEO of H&R Block until 2007. Ernst, who later held a senior role at the IRS, told ProPublica that Williams, quote, didn't want to offend the industry, noting that quote, he was particularly open to having sidebar conversations with key people where he could imagine himself landing one day, unquote. Today, Williams works at Intuit, where he's held the title of Chief Tax Officer since 2013. He's one of several former IRS employees who have gone on to work there. In a statement, Williams told ProPublica he did not have discussions about future employment with Intuit or other companies until after he left the IRS. He added that his career in government was focused on, quote, what is best for the taxpayer, unquote, and that he, quote, joined Intuit for the same reason, to help the American taxpayer, unquote. Despite Free File's declining use, the IRS often claimed that the program was nevertheless meeting one of its original goals, driving more people to file electronically instead of on paper. Ernst, who served as a senior official at the IRS from 2009 to 2010, didn't believe that a program used by so few people was having any such effect. Quote, it was a talking point that got trotted out all the time to justify the Free File Alliance, unquote, he said. Internally, the IRS managers have also argued that the program is, in a way, a success because it created, quote, a free marketplace, unquote, as one internal management report in 2017 put it. Apparently, customers weren't the only ones taken in by the word, quote, free. In 2018, Intuit faced rare scrutiny from inside the IRS. The agency asked its advisory council, a group of outside experts, to take stock of Free File. To the company's alarm, it soon became apparent that the council's report might be sharply critical. That July, council chair and University of California Davis law professor Dennis Ventry wrote 2 pieces criticizing an Intuit-backed bill in Congress that would make the program permanent. His op-ed in The Hill was called, quote, Free File Providers Scam Taxpayers. Congress Shouldn't Be Fooled, unquote. In response, the IRS again rose to Intuit's aid. It rushed to assure the company that Ventry's power to affect the program was limited, according to emails to the Free File Alliance obtained through a public records request. Quote, the commissioner has met directly with Mr. Ventry, IRS official Ken Corbin wrote to Steve Ryan, a lobbyist for Intuit who also represented the alliance. Quote, Mr. Ventry will recuse himself from participating or contributing to the topic of Free File, unquote. Corbin heads the IRS division that processes most Americans' tax returns and negotiates the Free File deal with Intuit and the industry. A few days later, Ryan arrived at the IRS's Constitution Avenue headquarters in Washington to mount a defense of the program. A former Democratic Senate aide turned lawyer lobbyist, Ryan is known on Capitol Hill for taking on politically fraught clients, including Trump attorney Michael Cohen and the government of Qatar. He helped create Free File in the early 2000s, and it was now his job to secure its future. Ryan's PowerPoint presentation of the IRS rehashed arguments that the company had been making for the past 15 years. It also highlighted a 2013 study by Brown University professor John Friedman, a former Obama National Economic Council official, to make the point that the program had been successful in generating, quote, free tax returns outside of Free File, unquote. The presentation did not mention that Friedman's study was paid for by the Free File companies and was not published in an academic journal. Friedman declined to say what he was paid, but told ProPublica he, quote, wrote the piece based on my analysis of the issues, which I stand by, unquote. Ventry, who attended the meeting, got a call the next day alerting him that a California public records request had been filed for his emails. They were subject to such a request because he's an employee of a state university. It came from the Free File Alliance, as the New York Times later reported. The request, Ventry believes, was designed to, quote, freak me out. In early October, the council sent a version of its final report, which included a harsh appraisal of the Free File program. to the IRS to seek responses before releasing it publicly the following month. But in mid-October, just weeks before the report saw the light of day, the Free File Industry Group fired off an urgent request to meet with IRS officials. The goal was to re-sign and improve the memorandum of understanding that governed the Free File program, according to the emails. The current agreement wasn't expiring for another 2 years, but Ryan cited the, quote, time urgency to make changes that will benefit taxpayers, quote, in the coming tax season, adding, quote, I have not darkened your door in 2018 and need your attention to this opportunity, unquote. The IRS's Corbin signed the new deal on October 31st. 2 weeks later, the Advisory Council report was released with a damning indictment of the program. Quote, the IRS's deficient oversight and performance standards for the Free File program put vulnerable taxpayers at risk, unquote, the report found. The expert body recommended that the IRS negotiate a series of new provisions designed to increase the use and oversight of the program, including mandating advertising by the companies. But it was too late. A new deal had already been signed with modest changes. As it had in the past, Intuit and the Alliance had effectively insulated the program from reform. Members of the council, Ventry said, were, quote, pissed off. A spokesman for the Free File Alliance said the group had pushed to renegotiate the deal in 2018 because of the looming 2020 presidential campaign. Quote, the reason for the timing of the extension of the agreement was the political season, he said. The group had not seen the report before its release, he added. In August, ProPublica sued the IRS to get more correspondence between the agency and Intuit's lobbyists. In response to our Freedom of Information Act requests, the agency has withheld over 100 pages. The case is ongoing. The new deal included rules that barred free file companies from offering extra products to the relatively small number of users who access the program. This makes it much more difficult to convert those users into paying customers. At around the same time, the industry took steps to make the program more difficult to find. Both Intuit and H&R Block added code to their free file websites that shielded them from search engines such as Google. The Intuit spokesman said the company increased paid search advertising for free file, quote, by nearly 80%, unquote, over the last year, and has data showing more people found the program through online search this year than last year, but he declined to provide specific figures. What is clear is that Intuit's business relies on keeping the use of free file low. The company has repeatedly declined to say how many of its paying customers are eligible for the program, which is currently open to anyone who makes under $66,000. But based on publicly available data and statements by Intuit executives, ProPublica estimates that roughly 15 million paying TurboTax customers could have filed for free if they found Free File. That represents more than $1.5 billion in estimated revenue, or more than half the total that TurboTax generates. Those affected include retirees, students, people on disability, and minimum wage workers. Customers, meanwhile, remain confused by Intuit's myriad uses of, quote, free, and internal documents show the company knows it. Over just a 2-week period this past filing season, Intuit received nearly 7,000 TurboTax customer calls in which the phrase supposed to be free was uttered, according to a company analysis. One customer complained that Intuit charged him even though it says free, free, free on the commercial. The TurboTax representative responded, that ad has been the bane of my existence. Even as TurboTax's business thrived, 2019 has been a rocky year for Intuit's long-running war against government encroachment. In April, the company was close to finally succeeding in its long-held goal to make Free File permanent. A bill called the Taxpayer First Act was sailing towards almost unanimous approval in Congress. But after ProPublica published a series of stories about the program, including a story showing that military families and students were particularly affected by Intuit's business tactics, the bill stalled. Congress ultimately removed the provision that would have enshrined Free File in law. After having enabled Intuit for so long, the IRS finally responded to the pressure. It hired a contractor to review the Free File program. But the contractor had previously argued against the IRS offering its own tax prep option, and the review did not recommend major changes. The agency has not yet announced its plans for the future of the program. The agency's Inspector General also launched an audit, which is ongoing. Other investigations and litigation followed, ranging from class action complaints alleging that consumers had been deceived by Intuit's tactics to investigations and lawsuits by regulators and prosecutors in New York and California. Intuit has denied wrongdoing, saying it, quote, has at all times been clear and fair with its customers, unquote. Despite the scrutiny, Wall Street has continued to embrace the company's business model. The company recently announced it made $1.5 billion in profits for its fiscal year. It expects its TurboTax unit to grow by 10% next year. Last year, the CEO was paid $20 million. The share price hit an all-time record. The company has returned to its old strategy: stay the course and take its case directly to the IRS and Congress. Its allies in the Senate have again advanced an appropriations bill that would bar the IRS from developing its own tax filing system. In the spring, Sazin Goodarzi, a former head of the TurboTax unit who took over as CEO of the entire company in January, sought to reassure employees. Quote, our view is this will be in the press until there is a resolution with the IRS, unquote, he said, according to the video obtained by ProPublica. Quote, and we're working with them and we feel very good about where this will end, unquote. This article was written by Justin Elliott and Paul Keel. I am going to put a link to this article and a link to the donation page for ProPublica if you like investigative journalism like this, if you appreciate being able to support an organization that did the FOIA requests and the lawsuits to get this information. I hope you'll consider that. And thanks so much for listening to this little series. I appreciate it. Bye. This has been a 3-part series where I've been sharing a report called Inside TurboTax's 20-Year Fight to Stop Americans from Filing Their Taxes for Free. This is an article written by Justin Elliott and Paul Keel for ProPublica. It represents hours of their research, FOIA requests, even lawsuits. So if you appreciate investigative journalism like this, I have a link in the show notes where you can make a donation to ProPublica, and I highly recommend that you do. I hope you enjoyed this series, and if you did, please scroll back, make sure you've listened to all 3 parts, and share it with a friend. Thanks, everybody. Thank you for watching. If you like this video, be sure to like, leave a comment, and subscribe to my channel. I'm so grateful for that. This video is for education and entertainment only. Nothing in this episode should be taken as individual tax or financial advice. You can find all the tools, books, and links I reference at sunlighttax.com/podcast.